Hi everyone and welcome to the bdhSterling webinar for today. We're going to be looking at the 10 top tips to help you successfully retire in Australia. So this is a complex area of planning, so we'll just give you a high-level overview of some of the matters that you might experience whilst retiring in this country. My name is Steph Mills. I'm the Head of Client Services at bdhSterling, and I'll be hosting the webinar today alongside my colleagues Nick Bond and Phil Soul. So just give an introduction to Nick and Phil. Nick is based in our Sydney office. He's our head of advice and he's been working with BDH from the very beginning. He's a dual qualified financial planner and he is based in Sydney. And along with Nick, we have Phil over in Melbourne, who is a fellow of the Personal Finance Society, has been with us for over a year and was a financial planner based in the UK before that. So we'll do some housekeeping before we jump into the presentation for you. We anticipate that the presentation will run for around half an hour. And after that, we'll look at answering as many questions as we can from you. Please do pop these into the Q&A section as we go along, rather than the chat section where they might get missed. If we can't answer your questions, then we'll endeavour to do that afterwards via email. Just finally, before we get started on the presentation, this is general advice, so it won't form any personal recommendations for you. So please don't act upon anything that you hear in the presentation without seeking personal advice. Okay, so I'll be back later to field some of the questions for Nick and Phil, but I'll hand over to Phil to start the presentation for you.
Thank you, Steph, and hello and welcome to all those attending this webinar. I'd firstly like to set the scene as to what it is we'll be talking about today. Australia has always been a popular destination for British expats, and the majority of you attending this webinar will understand why, whether it be the complete contrast in lifestyle here compared to the UK, the infinitely better climate, although state depending, of course, or quite simply because us Brits find it easier to not learn a different language. Whatever the reason is behind the move, recent stats have suggested that, as the presentation suggests, over 1 million British expats are currently living in Australia. And of that number, there are 250,000 retirees. So these are significant numbers. And if we compare that to the overall population of Australia, that makes up around 5%. For the majority of us, a successful retirement won't happen automatically. It won't be natural. And actually, getting a plan in place sooner rather than later could have a huge impact on a retirement here in Australia. So the key takeaway that I want to just point out at the start is that it's never too early, it's never too late to speak to someone who can help get a plan in place, which can be regularly reviewed whilst you approach and then take on retirement. In today's presentation, we will provide certain key issues and considerations in planning for a successful retirement. And in doing so, we have identified 10 key steps or top tips to help that successful transition into retirement. So firstly, the first thing to consider is how and when to retire. The idea behind this is that the landscape of retirement is constantly evolving and changing. Long gone are the days where retirement happens on a Friday finishing work happens on a Friday and then retirement happens that following Monday. What is more common now and what we're seeing more when speaking to clients is that retirement is almost something that is transitioned into and eased into. For example, there might be a case of taking part-time hours or reducing hours, or even taking a step back and having part-time work or consultancy. Whatever it is, there is no right or wrong answer, and it's completely down to individual circumstances as to how you want to enter retirement. But the key thing here is to understand your options. And I think from our point of view, BDH have licenses in both the UK and Australia, and understand both countries' workings in terms of retirement provision. So it is important to firstly think about retirement, how and when that might be, but also to speak to someone who can assist from both sides. Secondly, having thought about when and how to retirement, the next likely decision might be what to actually do in retirement. You may have been used to and accustomed to working 35 plus hours a week for many, many years, and all of a sudden you have a lot of time on your hands. And again, there is no right or wrong answer here. It's completely individual and subjective. It's what you want to achieve and do in retirement. To give some examples or some ideas, some people may look to travel in retirement. They've always been planning to use retirement to see more of the world, or to tick items off the bucket list, for example. Others may simply want more time to themselves, spend time with family, spend time with children, grandchildren. And again, important to stress, everyone is different. So speaking to an advisor who can hopefully put you in the right direction depending on what you are wanting, we think is important. Your ambitions in retirement is likely to be linked to resources. So whatever your intention in retirement, the achievability of that intention is likely to be linked to how much you are planning to take in retirement, how much of your retirement savings you have. So again, speaking to an advisor, getting a plan in place which can be regularly reviewed in the lead up to retirement, and indeed in retirement itself, can really make the difference between achieving what it is you want to do or not being able to, or having to change the plan appropriately. Okay, so having considered how and when to retirement and what it is you want to do, another key aspect is the decision of where to live. So here we're talking about the main residence, so your main property, and what it is you want to do with that property. For some, they may have already made the decision that staying in their current main residence is what they want to do throughout retirement, in which case the complexity, or the added complexity, that your unknown future and property would bring has been removed. But for others, they may have always thought that their goal is to downsize in retirement and release some capital from their home in order to take that into liquid retirement savings. Or indeed, the third option might be to purchase an additional home, a holiday home, potentially closer to family, whether that be in the city, close to the beach, or even family who live in a different state. Each state in Victoria might have different rules to definitely take into consideration before you make that decision. For example, stamp duty is different in a lot of the states, but also something simple as the value and market price of houses in your intended location might be different. So what we would do is work with clients closely to understand what they're going to do with their property, whether they're going to keep it or whether they want to add or downsize from their property portfolio, and again, what effect that might have on their liquid assets and how much they can bring into retirement to meet their objectives and goals. So staying on the property topic, I will now pass to Nick to speak a bit more about properties and liabilities.
Thanks, Phil. Good evening to everybody. Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you're based. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us. So as Phil mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit now about repaying your mortgage and whether that's the right thing to do. So historically, we were all focused on trying to pay off our mortgage as quickly as possible. And for some, that may still be the right thing to do. However, you're all probably aware of the low interest rate environment that we've been in the UK for a number of years, and now followed suit in Australia, which makes paying off the mortgage potentially less attractive than it was when interest rates were a fair amount higher. So also having freedom to access our UK pension funds for those who've got UK pension funds. Once you reach 55, you have the ability to be able to access lump sums. And then again, the question is, should I pay it off? Shouldn't I? It's very, very personal. There's no wrong or right answer. For some people, it will be best to pay it off, particularly those who don't like to take investment risk. But for those who are able to take on that risk, there is the potential that doing something different than paying the mortgage off, like investing the money or putting more into your retirement savings, could provide you with a better outcome in the long term. So the takeaway from that is you need to get some advice to be able to make an informed decision of whether the attention should be on paying down the mortgage, or are there other better investment options available for you. Okay, so on to the next point, and this is very important, having enough. How do you know how much you've got? When do you want to retire? How much is enough? And where do you want to live when you retire? And what do you want to do in retirement? So it's very important to assess your income requirements when you reach retirement. It's a very difficult question to answer, and again, very personal. It really depends on what you want to achieve, what your plans are. As Phil mentioned earlier, is one of those plans to go traveling for an extended period of time. We often have clients that like to go off for a few years and maybe travel around Australia or maybe travel around Europe. But you need to make sure you've got a pot of money aside for that. And then when retirement settles down to more normal life, if you get traveling out the way, you need to make sure you've got sufficient funds to support your annual spending requirements. Also, other things to consider: are you going to help support family? Often we have clients that want to help their children with weddings or lump sums for property purchases and such like. So it's very important to make sure that when you get to retirement, or before you get to retirement, you do have sufficient assets there. And some things are going to be out of your control. So the external factors being inflation and investment growth, we really don't know what those are going to hold. We can model it as best as we can, but we have to make sure that you overachieve rather than underachieve. And of course, taxation, making the best out of what you've got and drawing it out in a tax efficient way can really change your retirement plan. Okay, so still on the same subject, but expanding it a little bit more. How long will your money need to last? So to give you a bit of an idea, again, very difficult question to answer. If you can tell me how long you're going to live, we can give you the best financial plan possible. But obviously, it's not. We're not able to predict that. So we work on average life expectancies. So to give you an idea, a male who is currently age 65 is expected to live for a further 20 years, and a female aged 65 on average would go on to live another 22 years. So it really is a very complex decision to make when to retire, because you don't know how long you are going to survive. But what we can do is show you some cash flow forecasting, where we can explain to you how long that money that you currently have will last, and if you make some changes along the way, and we can come up with some good strategies, how much of a difference that will make to your cash flow. So for example, if you are 65, you don't want to have enough money simply to survive for the 22 years. If you're a female, you want to over exceed life expectancy, particularly as we are as a human being starting to live a lot longer with medical advances, and we're all taking better care of ourselves. So making sure you've got enough to last you is of vital importance. So your sources of income. For a lot of you, your retirement is likely to be funded from various sources. There is the UK state pension, for example. There's also an Australian social security pension that's available to some people. You'll have UK private pensions and Australian superannuations. You'll have different asset sources. So what we want to do is really determine where best to draw those down from in the most tax efficient manner. And for some people who've spent most of their accumulation years of working years in the UK and have moved or moving over to Australia to retire, there will be the opportunity to look at whether moving them across to Australia is the right option to do. So again, another takeaway, make informed decisions, get the knowledge you need to make that informed decision via a plan that we can help you with. So what are those various sources of income? As I mentioned earlier, and touched on the pensions. So you've got the state pensions, whether that be Australian or UK, depending on your entitlements. You'll need to understand what you are entitled to. You'll have personal pension arrangements, again, probably across the UK and Australia for some people. You may have cash savings in the bank, and used to get interest payments on them, but not these days. And you'll probably, some of you that have spent time in the UK in the last 20 or so years may have ISAs, where you may have some money invested, or again, it could be cash savings or deposits. You may also have other assets outside of any savings wrappers. So you might have some individual stocks and shares that you hold personally. You might have bonds, offshore or onshore, that can pay you an income tax effectively. And for a lot of people, there's often an investment property there, where you're getting an income from renting that property out. So again, getting or drawing the income for the right sources and keeping the right assets in the right places can make a big difference to how you structure retirement and how successful your retirement is. So Phil, oh no, it's still with me, is it? Sorry.
No, I'm happy.
Oh no, it's over to you, Phil. Is it? Sorry. Yeah, over to Phil. Sorry.
That's okay. So I guess just following on from the list Nick provided as to the different sources of income in different countries. As UK expats, it's common and more than likely that we're going to have retirement savings in both countries, both the UK and Australia. So for a lot of us, it will be something that we need to decide on about how moving those assets from the UK to Australia. And it's important to understand and comprehend that despite the fact both countries are part of the Commonwealth and share the same monarch, they have two completely different tax regimes. Whilst they may also have the type of tax which is common in both countries, the actual way that that tax works in each country can be completely different. So again, it just indicates and hopefully stresses that it's one thing knowing that you want to move to Australia or to retire in Australia, but to retire successfully, understanding the different tax regimes and how they interact is, again, super important. Just to give an example, the disposal of a UK asset as an Australian resident And of course, it depends on visa status at this stage as well. But as an Australian resident, disposal of a UK property would likely lead to capital gains tax, but that being charged here in Australia. And unlike the UK, here in Australia, we don't have the threshold, the capital gains tax threshold available to us. So likely to be a bigger tax bill as the alternative, which is to have sold the property or asset in the UK whilst a UK resident. In addition, looking at it through the other way, so the other side of the coin, which is moving from Australia to the UK, just out of interest, if you cease being a resident in Australia and then sell your main residence here in Australia, so whilst a non-resident, the main resident exemption, which you would have, I'm sure, heard about, would also cease. So again, timing's crucial, because you don't want to be on the other side of an unnecessary and quite large in some circumstances tax. And it's pretty important at this juncture for me to point out that we have a sister company, bdhTax, headed by a colleague of mine, Alan Collette, who is authorised from both the UK and Australia point of view to provide tax advice on just that. So yes, we can assist in how to, or advising on tax efficiency of moving assets, but to understand the tax legislation behind that, again, is very, very important. But fortunately, bdhTax, who a number of you will be familiar with, are here to help on all things tax. The following slide. Now, this is, I guess, one of the, I would say, most misunderstood part of the UK pension system. A lot of clients I speak to aren't aware that they might have an entitlement to the UK state pension. For them, it was been a case of they've lived in Australia for a number of years, and as such, their UK state pension doesn't exist. And that just isn't the case for a lot of clients. The rules changed for UK state pension in April 2016. And the new rules are that you require a minimum of 10 years of national insurance contributions to be eligible for any UK state pension at all. But they also introduce a maximum amount of state pension that we can all receive. And that's capped at 35 years worth of national insurance contributions. So even if you reside in Australia and haven't stepped foot in the UK for some time, if you have built up more than 10 years worth of national insurance contributions, which is usually payable through employment, but can also be credited in a variety of ways, you will be entitled to a UK state pension from your UK state pension age. It's true to say that there is no indexation or annual increases on the UK state pension as an Australian resident, but that is only from when the UK state pension starts, when you start receiving income. You will still receive the benefit of the annual increase of the UK state pension up until that point. So it's only when it starts being in payment that it remains level throughout your life, but still over 10 years worth of national insurance contributions, you will be provided with a guaranteed income for life. Looking again to the Australian side of things, sorry, Steph, if we can just stay on that previous one. So the Australia has a similar type of pension. It's called the Australian age pension. And yes, again, there is a qualifying period. So for some of our clients who have built up an entitlement to the UK state pension, they may have also built up an entitlement to the Australian equivalent, the Australian age pension. So it's a 10-year qualifying period, but one of the key differences between the both is that the Australian age pension is means tested. Now it's means tested via two methods. One is income and one is assets. So the key takeaway is that even without indexation, the UK state pension will provide a non-means tested guaranteed income for life, assuming that you have an entitlement and have built up enough national insurance contributions. In addition, the Australian age pension could really boost your guaranteed income in retirement. So well worth checking out. And again, bdhSterling can help with understanding how much you're entitled to and from which country.
Thanks, Phil. So I'll cover the last couple of points. Big one being the emotional aspects of retirement. So one day you're at work and all of a sudden the next day you've got all this spare time on your hand. It's a very significant life change. Can be very disrupting, or can take a good amount of time to get used to and come to terms with. You're not going to be surrounded by colleagues and the hustle and bustle of the working life. You're going to have a lot more freedom to do what you wish, and a lot more time on your hands to spend doing the stuff you want to do. So it does take some people a period of time to adjust to that. Couple that with potentially moving to a new country to retire. It can be, it's not challenging, but can be, things to encounter that you may not have done or thought about if you weren't moving countries. So it is important to understand, if you're coming over from the UK to move to Australia, or vice versa, if people are moving from Australia to the UK for retirement, it's very important to understand what that journey is going to look like. And it's not just about money, it's about making the right lifestyle choice as well. And I have a lot of clients who are in retirement now, and they make sure that they challenge themselves mentally, and some will volunteer, carry out volunteer work. Some will work on committees of certain charities or clubs, just to keep that mental activity ticking over and remaining stimulated. So big takeaway here is just make sure you're preparing yourself for that lead up. I'm sure some of you can't wait to leave work and retire, but some people it will be a big change for them. Okay, so a bit of a morbid one, this one, but a reality nonetheless for some people, unfortunately. So what if you don't make it to retirement? It's a difficult subject to broach with your partners and yourselves, but also with your family. But it is a very important thing to consider if the worst does happen. How is that going to pan out for the family? How have you got your affairs in order to be able to make sure that your family can benefit the most from a less than good situation? So there are a lot of things to consider. Making sure that beneficiaries are right on your pension funds, making sure you've got insurances in place to cover should you cut your working life short inadvertently. So there's a lot of things to consider there. Inheritance planning as well. So for those that are living in Australia and don't have a will, if you die intestate, which means without a will, then the state will step in on your behalf and distribute your assets how they feel is appropriate based on your family situation. Not only does that mean potentially the assets might not go to where you wish, excuse me, but also the state charge a sum for doing so, and it's a fairly considerable amount. So do take the time to look and get a will in place, and we can help. We've got contacts, and also it is part of what we would like to do is help in that that process of making sure your assets go to where you wish for them to go to. So yeah, successful estate planning can help the tax side of things a lot when you pass away. So that wraps up the 10 points. I'm going to pass over to Steph now. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Phil, for going through the presentation. So just to summarise the top 10 tips for you to ensure that your retirement is successful here in Australia. We fully believe that regular planning and reviews is a big part of providing a good approach to your retirement and making sure that you're on track to your goals in that time of your life. We have lots of tax efficient strategies that help to maximize your income in retirement. So we look at building those into your plan with you. And we all know that there can be emotional challenges when you do retire in a country that hasn't always been home. So if those challenges do come up, we're here to help. And if they do turn into meaning that you return to the UK, we can assist you with that side of things as well. So we hope that you found the presentation useful. We'll just talk about how we can, how BDH can help you going forward. So we do really understand the challenges and pitfalls of retiring in a country like Australia. We have lots of dual qualified advisors here that are on hand to help you. And we've also got offices in the UK and Australia, which means that we can assist you wherever you are in the world. We believe that we have a genuine global one-stop shop, this meaning that all of our administration, our defined benefit analysis, SMSF administration, and so on is all in-house. And we're very proud that we can deliver that under one roof. We're also holistic financial planners here and in the UK. We like to build ongoing relationships with our clients. So if there is anything that is outside of retiring in Australia that you require help with, then we can certainly help you with that as well. So we'll move on to the Q&A now. I can see that there's some good questions that have come through, so I'll just take a moment to have a look through those. Okay, so first question, this one for you, Nick. Are UK wills valid in Australia?
Okay, so no, in short, if you're living in Australia, you need an Australian will to take care of your Australian assets. So if you own property, for example, or investment portfolios, cash in the bank, and that's in Australia, you will need to get an Australian will in place. Your UK will, if you have one, will be able to take care of your UK assets, but in short, no, your UK won't cover your Australian assets.
Okay, thanks for that. And one for you, Phil. What is the maximum current monthly amount of a UK state pension?
Okay, so in the current tax year, so the UK tax year that is, if you have full entitlement, i.e. you have a maxed out 35 years of national insurance contributions, you will receive £175 pounds per week. I actually think it's £175.20 per week. Every little helps. But yeah, I mean that it's paid weekly. It's important to say, and it's also paid gross, which is another key factor to bear in mind.
Great, thanks for that, Phil. Okay, another one here. If you are in Australia when you sell your UK property, do you get taxed twice? Nick, do you want to take that one?
Yep, sure. So Australia and the UK do have a double taxation agreement, but it gets very complex on the capital gains tax side of things. Rules frequently change certainly in the UK and can change in Australia. So whilst you might not pay twice, you'll need to take some advice as to the most efficient way to pay the tax bill and the implications of where and when you do dispose of it, as Phil alluded to in some of the earlier conversation. So in short, you won't get taxed twice, but there are different regimes, so it could mean different tax bills in different jurisdictions. So well worth taking advice from BDH Tax on that aspect. Make an informed decision before you sell a property is often the best way to go about it.
Thanks, Nick. There's a couple of other questions on the same ilk, so I'll just fire these ones at you as well. So any general advice when it comes to retirement and if you own a UK property?
So if the property, if you still own it and you're living in Australia, you got to decide whether or not you should keep that property. Some people, if they've got no debt on the property, will use it as an income stream, and that can help support their super or pension income, or for some people it might be their only income stream. So those people will look to maintain it. The other option is, do you sell it to help fund liquidity if the income is not sufficient to support your drawdown needs? Property, as you're probably aware, is very liquid, so some people will choose to sell it when they get to retirement and have the liquidity of the having the cash in the bank or in other investments that you can sell down from.
Thanks, Nick. And just one more on this topic. Is capital gains tax applicable if the house sale is completed after initial arrival in Australia?
So if you sold the property that you owned in the UK once you arrive in Australia, then yes, potentially it is. But again, it is a complex area and something you should take advice on. There can be allowances for it being your primary principal residence, for example. But this is one that I would definitely pass over to Alan Collette and the BDH tax team, as they're able to give you a spot-on assessment as to what the liability may be, or hopefully in some cases may not be.
Can I just add to that, Steph? I think that the crux of that question will come down to residency status, which, as Nick and I know, is a massive grey area. It's all about intention to stay and how long you wish to stay. So the question you've just been asked to ask us, we don't know if that person means to or selling the UK property when they move permanently here, or whether it is just a temporary holiday or a temporary amount of time. So a lot of it is to do with residency, of which the rules are complex. And like Nick said, I mean, getting a tax advisor who understands both sides is probably the best thing to do.
Perfect. Thank you both for that. We have some questions here on the state pension. So Phil, I'll ask you to answer these ones. So are the UK state pension payments subject to Australian tax if they're drawn here?
In short, yes, they're taxable. The UK state pension is paid gross, and interestingly, from an accountancy point of view, it's often the first source of income that is taxed, whereas other income sources will be added on top. So yes, it's fully taxable. However, given the maximum amount that I mentioned earlier, that should, from an Australian point of view, fall within your tax-free threshold here in Australia of around $18,000. So yes, it's taxable, but depending on your tax status and situation, it could be that no tax is due on that amount.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And for you again, Phil, if you have the opportunity to top up your UK pension, is it generally worth doing, or is it dependent on individual circumstances?
Yeah, good question, and actually quite common, I would say, when I speak to clients about the UK state pension. Or as a top level answer, I would say that if affordable, it is worth topping up, or at least seeing how much you'd actually need to top up to the maximum amount. The simple reason is because the return that you would receive through the increased income of the state pension would be a better return percentage for the amount you put in when compared to, you know, private annuities on the open market. So if you had a capital amount and wanted to purchase an annuity, which essentially is what a state pension is, although it's not purchased, the return you'd get on that would be far lower than what you'd get on the UK state pension. But probably important for me to say that, of course, everyone's circumstances are different, and everyone would have to top up a different amount compared to their neighbour. So yes, it's worth it, but only if affordable and it makes sense.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Nick, a question for you. does your service extend to products in Gibraltar?
Yes, it can do, depending on what that product is. But yes, we can look at Gibraltar-based assets. Typically, it would be Curops, I would suspect. But yes, we can help with those that have Curops in Gibraltar. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks for that. A couple of questions here that I'll answer. How do you deal with clients in Australia who don't live in Victoria, New South Wales or WA? It's a good question because that's where our physical offices all are. But we do service clients throughout Australia. So, for example, Phil, who's on the webinar today, Phil looks after our clients in Tasmania and the ACT, as well as in Victoria. So we have financial planners that service other states, and when it's safe to travel, they will travel to those states to meet clients there. And in the interim, everything is done on video chats and video meetings. So that's how we service clients across Australia. Will we be able to get a copy of the presentation? Yes, absolutely. So after the webinar is finished, it will be uploaded onto our YouTube page. So if you just search bdhSterling on YouTube, you'll be able to get a copy of the slides. If you would like them, the link emailed to you, please just let us know and we can arrange that as well. Okay, so a couple of questions on property again. How is income from buy-to-let properties in the UK treated in Australia? Nick, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So depends on your visa status or residency status. So if you're a permanent resident or citizen, your worldwide income is accessible to tax in Australia. So when you come to do your tax return, the ATO will expect for you to declare all of your worldwide income. So UK property income will be included in that. You can have your UK property income paid gross, so that the tax bill can be paid in Australia. It can make affairs simpler, and again, this is something that BDH Tax can assist with. But in short, yes, it is accessible here in Australia, and it will depend on what your other income is as to what your tax liability will be on it.
Great, thank you. And one more on property here. So do you have any advice on buying a property to let in Australia or still in the UK, renting this out and then moving into the Australian property when moving back to Australia? Is it easy to get a mortgage while still living and working in the UK, an Australian mortgage?
Guess that's coming to me, yeah? Okay, so I'll start with the mortgage piece first. It will be quite challenging to get a mortgage within Australia if you're living in the UK. I'm not aware of any lenders that will offer that. Unfortunately, it did used to be possible, but as I say, I'm not aware of that. Any lenders that will help on that front, unfortunately. But yes, you could buy a property here. You could rent it out whilst you're in the UK. Of course, from a UK perspective, that income is going to be accessible. And then, yes, when you move to Australia, moving back into it could be the sensible thing to do. So not a very easy question to answer without specifics, but in general, yes, it's possible to buy the property, but the mortgage is going to be difficult to source.
Perfect, thank you, Nick. Phil, a question for you here. How much do your services cost?
Yep, that's fair enough. It depends what type of service, I guess. If we're speaking about pensions in general, we will charge a fixed fee for a pension review and then advice on that pension. If we're talking about transitioning that pension to Australia, There is different costs involved because that's added complexity as well. So without, again, like Nick said, without knowing specifics, it's difficult to ask, but essentially we charge a flat fee for a pension review and to provide advice. That fee is would be added onto if the situation is more complex, like transferring and bringing that pension away from the UK to Australia. And I'm sure if this person emailed in following this, when we understood a bit more about their circumstances, I'd be able to provide a bit more specific answer on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Phil. Okay, so one question here. What can you do if your lifelong national insurance number isn't recognised by the online UK government inquiry site?
Yep, okay. Firstly, if I just take a step back and explain what that site is. So when I speak about state pensions, a lot of clients ask how to go about finding their entitlement. And it used to be that there was a form, the BR19 form, which was simply complete and then posted. But given what's going on in the world currently, it's probably easier to go online. So a simple internet search of HMRC state pension forecast or state pension eligibility will take you to their website, and it's called the Government Gateway, the HMRC Government Gateway. Using that site, you can check state pension age and entitlement to the state pension itself. But the question was, what do you do if the national insurance is or has been lost or incorrect? Now, national insurance is the important number in which HMRC would use to be able to track you and be able to compare you as a person and your entitlement. Probably best for me to say, give them a call. Speaking to HMRC can be slightly difficult in certain times, depending on how busy they are, but they will more than likely ask for you to provide certain other documents, certain other proof, if your national insurance number can't be recognised. And I will assume that will be potentially a proof of address or ID documents, something that they would have been aware of before in order to match that up. But worth calling them, I think, is probably the best answer.
Great, thank you, Phil. Okay, so I think that just about wraps up the questions that we have. If there are any that have been missed, we will get back to you after the webinar separately, and we'll go through and just double check that we haven't missed any of those out. So all that's left to say is thank you for listening, and please do get in touch if there is anything that you would like BDH to assist you with going forward. Thanks, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.